The port of Cherbourg is quiet now. Too quiet. Smoke still hangs in the air, moving slowly with the sea wind. The water inside the harbor looks calm, almost peaceful. But nothing here feels like peace. American soldiers stand at the edge of the docks, looking out at what they fought so hard to take. They expected ships. They expected supplies. They expected relief. Instead, they see broken cranes, twisted metal, and silent water that cannot help them. This was supposed to be the moment when everything became easier. Weeks after landing in Normandy, the Allies needed a deep-water port to survive. Cherbourg was that port. It was the prize. It was the answer to hunger, fuel shortages, and endless lines of trucks stuck on narrow roads. Every plan pointed here. Every map circled this city. Now it is in their hands. But it does not work. Men walk slowly across the docks. Their faces are tired. Their eyes scan the damage. Nothing is said, but everyone understands the same truth. The Germans did exactly what they promised to do. They destroyed the port before giving it up. Victory has arrived, but it feels hollow. To understand how this happened, we must step back. Back before the silence. Back before the port was broken. Back to a time when Cherbourg stood as one of the strongest fortress ports in Europe. A place Hitler ordered to be held at all costs. A place the Allies believed they could not live without. The story of Cherbourg is not just about walls and guns. It is about time. It is about pressure. It is about choices made under fear. And it begins with a simple problem the Allies could not escape. After D-Day, thousands of soldiers poured onto the beaches of Normandy. Tanks, trucks, fuel, food, and medicine followed them. But beaches are fragile lifelines. Storms can erase them. Enemy fire can cut them off. The longer the Allies stayed without a port, the closer they came to disaster. Every general knew this. Every planner feared it. Cherbourg sat at the top of the Cotentin Peninsula like a locked door. It was the only major deep-water port in the area. If the Allies could take it quickly, they could feed their armies and push deeper into France. If they failed, everything slowed. Men would wait. Supplies would run thin. Momentum would die. The Germans understood this too. That is why Cherbourg was turned into a fortress. Concrete bunkers watched the sea. Guns covered every approach. Mines filled the land around it. And behind all of this stood a clear order from Berlin. If Cherbourg could not be held, it must be destroyed. For the German soldiers inside the city, this order created a heavy burden. They were not fighting to win. They were fighting to delay, to deny, to make sure the port would never help the enemy. Some believed in the mission. Others simply obeyed. All of them knew the end was coming. As American forces moved north across the peninsula, the pressure increased on both sides. Roads became crowded. Villages changed hands. The land itself slowed progress with thick hedges and narrow paths. Every mile forward cost time. And time was the one thing the Allies did not have. Inside Cherbourg, preparations were already underway. Charges were placed near docks and cranes. Plans were made to flood key areas. Engineers worked quietly, knowing their task was not to defend forever, but to erase the port from use. Each step brought a strange mix of duty and regret. Outside the city, American commanders faced their own doubts. Should they rush and risk heavy losses? Or move carefully and give the Germans more time to destroy everything? Every option carried danger. Every delay made the final prize less valuable. The fighting tightened like a closing fist. German positions fell one by one. Some units surrendered. Others fought until they could fight no more. Civilians hid in cellars, listening to the sounds above, unsure who would control their city by morning. Fear lived in every street even when no shots were fired. Then at last the end came. The German commander of Cherbourg surrendered the city. The fortress had fallen. Flags were raised. The battle was over. But the moment victory arrived, a new truth became clear. The port was dead. Explosions had shattered docks. Sunken ships blocked the harbor. Cranes lay broken like fallen giants. The water itself was filled with obstacles. It would take weeks, maybe months, to make the port useful again. Time the Allies did not plan to lose. The soldiers standing there understood something important. This battle was not won in the way they imagined. The enemy had lost the city but achieved their goal. The Allies had taken Cherbourg but not the lifeline they needed. As the smoke drifted over the ruined harbor, a quiet question hung in the air. How did a victory become a problem? And what would this cost the war moving forward? To answer that, we must understand why Cherbourg mattered so much in the first place. Cherbourg mattered because modern war runs on supplies, not courage alone. Guns do not fire without shells. Tanks do not move without fuel. Soldiers cannot fight without food, rest, and medicine. After the landings in Normandy, the Allied army was growing larger every single day. Thousands became tens of thousands. Tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands. All of them depended on a steady flow of supplies coming from across the sea. At first, the beaches were enough. Ships unloaded men and machines directly onto the sand. Temporary ports were built. Trucks drove day and night. But beaches are weak lifelines. A storm can tear them apart. Rough seas can stop landings for days. Enemy fire can slow everything. Every Allied planner knew this was dangerous. Beaches could start an invasion. They could not sustain it. That is why Cherbourg stood out on every map. Cherbourg was different. It was a deep water port. Large ships could dock there safely. Supplies could move faster and in greater numbers. Fuel could flow without delay. Heavy equipment could arrive intact. With Cherbourg working, the invasion could breathe. Without it, the entire operation risked choking on its own size. For the Allies, Cherbourg was not a luxury. It was a necessity. But for the Germans, Cherbourg was a weapon. Germany knew it could not throw the Allies back into the sea forever. The landings were too large. The forces were too strong. So German strategy shifted toward delay. Every day the Allies struggled without a port was a victory for Germany. Every broken crane and blocked dock meant hunger, exhaustion, and slowed movement for the enemy. Hitler understood the value of ports very well. He ordered them turned into fortresses. He demanded they be held for as long as possible. And if they could not be held, they were to be destroyed. The port was never to serve the enemy. This order turned Cherbourg into a place of grim purpose. German soldiers stationed there knew their mission was not heroic. It was heavy. They were not expected to survive forever. They were expected to buy time. Time for Germany to regroup. Time to strengthen defenses deeper in France. Time to make the invasion bleed. Inside the city, the port was prepared like a trap. Explosives were placed carefully. Ships were chosen to be sunk in narrow channels. Machinery was marked for destruction. Engineers studied the harbor the way a doctor studies a body, knowing exactly where to strike to stop it from working. For the Allies, this knowledge created deep anxiety. They knew the Germans would try to destroy the port. The only question was how much could be saved. Every hour mattered. If Cherbourg fell quickly, maybe some parts could be captured intact. If it took too long, nothing would remain. This made the race for Cherbourg urgent and cruel. American forces pushed north across the Cotentin Peninsula with speed in mind. They could not afford a slow, careful advance. But speed came with risk. German defenses were still strong. The land was difficult. Narrow roads slowed movement. Thick hedges hid enemy positions. Weather often worked against them. Commanders felt the weight of impossible choices. Push too hard and men would die. Move too slow and the port would be lost anyway. There was no perfect path forward. Meanwhile, German commanders faced their own struggle. Many knew the port could not be saved. They could see the Allied pressure growing each day. Supplies inside the fortress ran low. Communication with higher command became unreliable. Yet the order remained clear. Halt. Delay. Destroy. For civilians living in Cherbourg, the port's importance brought only fear. The city was no longer just a home. It was a target. Families hid underground as explosions echoed nearby. The port they once depended on for work and trade became a reason their city suffered. The importance of Cherbourg also stretched far beyond Normandy. Back in Britain, planners watched reports closely. They counted ships. They calculated fuel use. They knew every delay near Cherbourg created problems everywhere else. If the port failed, new solutions would be needed. Longer supply routes. More trucks. More strain on men already exhausted. The entire Allied advance into Europe balanced on this single point. This is why the battle for Cherbourg was not about pride or symbolism. It was about survival. It was about whether the invasion could keep moving forward or slowly grind to a halt. When Cherbourg finally fell, it should have been a moment of relief. But instead, it revealed the cruel truth behind the battle. The port mattered so much that its loss hurt even in victory. The Germans had lost control, but they had succeeded in denying its use. Cherbourg mattered because it showed something many commanders already feared. In modern war, winning ground is not enough. What matters is what that ground can still give you. The battle proved that strategy does not end when the fighting stops. Consequences last far longer than gunfire. As Allied engineers now stared at the ruined harbor, they faced a new fight. Not against soldiers but against time, damage, and broken plans. The question was no longer how to take Cherbourg. The question was whether the invasion could survive without it. To understand how the Allies reached this dangerous position, we must look at the world that existed before a single American soldier reached the outskirts of Cherbourg. A world filled with planning, confidence, fear, and pressure that built quietly long before the first shot near the port was fired. In the months before the invasion, the war in Europe felt balanced on a knife's edge. Germany still controlled most of Western Europe. Its armies were tired but not broken. Its defenses along the French coast were strong on paper and frightening in reality. Concrete walls, coastal guns, and endless minefields stretched across beaches and ports. Hitler believed these defenses could stop any invasion, or at least bleed it dry. Across the English Channel, the Allies prepared in silence and secrecy. Britain became a giant military camp. Roads filled with trucks. Fields filled with tents. Ports filled with ships waiting for orders. Millions of men trained, waited, and wondered if the plans made by generals would truly work when tested by fear and chaos. Confidence existed, but so did doubt. Allied leaders knew that landing on the beaches was only the beginning. Once ashore, their armies would need constant support. Food, fuel, ammunition, medical supplies. None of it could pause. Even a short break could mean disaster. From the very start, planners feared the question of supply more than enemy guns. This fear shaped everything. Maps of northern France were studied again and again. Every port was marked. Every road measured. Cherbourg stood out like a bright signal. It was the largest port close to the landing beaches. It had deep water and strong docks. It was close enough to matter quickly. Without Cherbourg, the invasion would rely on fragile solutions that could fail at any moment. German leaders were studying the same maps. They knew Cherbourg's value just as well. That is why it became a fortress long before the Allies landed. Coastal guns were aimed toward the sea. Defensive lines were built inland. Strong points were placed on hills and roads leading into the city. Cherbourg was not meant to fight alone. It was meant to slow an entire army. Inside the German command, pressure was growing. Resources were stretched thin across many fronts. The Eastern Front demanded men and supplies. Allied bombing weakened factories and rail lines. German commanders in France understood they were unlikely to receive reinforcements once the invasion began. What they had on the ground might be all they would ever have. This knowledge changed how they thought about defense. The goal was no longer victory in the open field. The goal was time. Every hour gained mattered. Every delay could change the future of the war. Ports like Cherbourg became tools to hurt the enemy without needing to defeat them directly. For Hitler, ports were symbols of control. He believed fortress cities could hold forever if ordered to do so. He trusted concrete more than flexibility. He trusted orders more than changing reality. From far away, he demanded resistance without retreat. This thinking shaped Cherbourg's fate long before the battle began. Among German soldiers stationed there, feelings were mixed. Some believed the fortress could hold. Others saw the size of the Allied buildup and felt dread. Many focused only on duty and survival. They trained, prepared, and waited, knowing the storm would come. For civilians, the weight was even heavier. Life continued, but always under shadow. Rumors spread quietly. Some believed liberation was near. Others feared what fighting would bring to their streets and homes. The port, once a place of work and movement, became something dangerous and watched. As D-Day approached, tension grew everywhere. In Britain, soldiers wrote letters they were not sure would ever be read. Commanders reviewed plans again and again, knowing no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Weather added uncertainty. A single storm could delay everything. A single mistake could cost thousands of lives. When the landings finally came, the world changed in a single morning. The beaches were taken, but the war did not slow down. Instead, it became louder, faster, and more unforgiving. The race toward Cherbourg began the moment the first troops stepped onto French soil. Every step north carried hope and fear in equal measure. German forces reacted as expected. They resisted where they could. They delayed where they could not hold. Every road became a problem. Every village became a decision. The land itself seemed to resist movement, trapping men in narrow paths and hidden fields. Behind all this movement stood the silent truth. Cherbourg was ticking like a clock. Every day that passed allowed more destruction inside the port. Every delay gave German engineers time to prepare their final act. Every cautious move by the Allies risked turning their most important prize into a useless shell. This was the world before the battle truly began. A world shaped by plans, fear, pride, and pressure. A world moving steadily toward collision. And when that collision finally came, strategy would meet reality in ways no map could predict. As the world moved closer to that collision, the minds guiding the battle carried their own quiet struggles. Wars are not fought by maps alone. They are shaped by people. By what they believe. By what they fear. By what they refuse to question. On the American side, commanders faced a problem with no clean answer. They were under pressure from above and from below. From above came the demand for speed. The invasion had to keep moving. Supplies were already strained. Every delay made the situation more dangerous. From below came the reality of the battlefield. Men were tired. The land was slow. The enemy was still organized. American generals knew Cherbourg was vital. They also knew rushing could cost many lives. This tension lived in every decision. Push forward today or pause and regroup. Risk confusion or risk losing the port entirely. There was no safe choice, only necessary ones. Some commanders believed speed was everything. They argued that pressure would break German resistance before full destruction could be completed. Others warned that moving too fast through unfamiliar land would create chaos. Units could become lost. Communication could fail. The battle could spin out of control. These debates did not happen calmly in quiet rooms. They happened with reports piling up. With radio messages cutting in and out. With the sound of distant fighting reminding everyone that time was already slipping away. On the German side, the struggle was different, but just as heavy. German commanders in Cherbourg knew they were fighting a losing battle in the long run. Allied strength was overwhelming. Air power ruled the skies. Naval guns waited offshore. Relief was unlikely. Yet surrender was not an option given lightly. Orders from Berlin were strict. Cherbourg was a fortress. A fortress does not retreat. This created a painful divide between reality and command. Some German officers understood that holding the city forever was impossible. They focused instead on their true mission. Delay the enemy. Damage the port. Make Cherbourg useless. In their minds, this was success, even if it meant losing the city itself. Others still hoped for a miracle. A counterattack. A change in orders. A sudden shift in the war. Hope can be powerful, but it can also blind. Holding on too long risked capture before demolition was complete. Above all of them loomed Hitler's distant voice. Orders traveled down the chain without room for discussion. Hold at all costs. Destroy before surrender. These commands were clear, but they ignored the human cost of carrying them out. For soldiers on the ground, obedience and fear mixed together. German troops manning bunkers and roadblocks were not thinking about grand strategy. They thought about the next hour, the next night, the next shell falling nearby. They followed orders because that was the structure they knew. Some believed in the cause. Others simply wanted to survive. American soldiers advancing north felt a different kind of pressure. They were pushing into unknown land. The hedges hid danger. Roads twisted and narrowed. Units sometimes moved faster than their supplies. Sleep was short. Meals were rushed. The sense of urgency never faded. They knew Cherbourg was important even if they did not know all the reasons why. They felt it in the way officers spoke, in the way orders were given, in the way no one talked about slowing down. Between these two forces stood civilians. French families watched armies move through their lives like storms. They did not choose this battle, yet they lived inside it. German soldiers occupied their streets. American troops approached with hope and fear mixed together. Every sound carried meaning. Every silence felt dangerous. Commanders on both sides were aware of them, but could not allow emotion to stop the battle. War forces leaders to think in numbers and objectives, even as people live inside those calculations. As the Americans closed in, German commanders faced their final choices. How long to hold each position? When to pull back? When to begin full demolition? Each decision balanced military value against human cost. Some chose to fight longer than planned. Others focused fully on denial. Communication became strained. Confusion grew. Orders arrived late or not at all. The fortress began to crack from the inside. American commanders sensed this change. Resistance was still strong but uneven. Some positions fought hard. Others collapsed quickly. This created uncertainty. Was the enemy weakening or setting traps? Should they push harder or prepare for a final stand near the city? The mental weight of these questions was heavy. Every commander understood one truth. Once the battle for Cherbourg truly began, there would be no pause. No reset. The decisions made in the coming hours would shape not just the fate of a city, but the future of the entire invasion. As forces moved closer, the air seemed to tighten. The sound of the sea mixed with distant explosions. The port waited ahead, silent and prepared. Strategy was about to meet reality. And when it did, no one would be able to fully control what followed. The moment the battle truly ignited did not come with one clear signal. There was no single explosion that marked the start. Instead, it arrived quietly through movement, pressure, and the slow collapse of distance between two determined forces. American units moved forward under a gray sky. The land ahead looked calm, but it was not empty. German defenses were layered and hidden. Hills blocked sight. Roads bent sharply. The hedges stood thick and tall, cutting fields into narrow lanes. Every step forward felt uncertain. Every pause felt dangerous. Plans existed on paper. Timetables were written. Routes were marked. But the battlefield refused to follow clean lines. As American forces pushed north, they met resistance that came and went without warning. Some German positions fought hard, slowing progress for hours. Others fell quickly, leaving behind silence and confusion. This uneven resistance made it difficult to read the enemy's true strength. Was this collapse or preparation? German commanders inside the fortress had already accepted that the outer lines would not hold forever. Their goal was not to stop the advance completely. It was to slow it, to force caution, to steal time. Every American delay meant more work could be done inside the port. Inside Cherbourg, the sound of distant fighting grew louder each day. Engineers worked under pressure. Explosives were placed carefully, not in panic, but with method. Cranes were prepared for destruction. Docks were marked. Channels were chosen for sinking ships. These actions were carried out with grim focus. There was no joy in this work. Only purpose. As American forces came closer, communication became harder for both sides. Radios failed. Messages arrived late. Units sometimes moved ahead of support. Others waited for orders that never came. In war, confusion spreads faster than clarity. American soldiers advancing through villages felt the tension rise. Streets were empty. Windows were dark. Doors were closed. Civilians hid and listened. The air felt heavy as if the city ahead was holding its breath. When fighting broke out, it was sharp and sudden. Short bursts of chaos followed by long stretches of waiting. The sound of distant guns echoed off buildings and hills. Smoke drifted without direction. No one could see the whole battle. Everyone saw only their part. This was the fog of war made real. Commanders tried to keep momentum. Orders pushed units forward. Speed was still the goal. But speed came at a cost. Roads became crowded. Vehicles struggled to move. Supplies lagged behind. The very problem Cherbourg was meant to solve began to show itself even before the city was reached. German defenders used the terrain well. Elevated positions allowed observation and control of key roads. Coastal guns still threatened from afar. Even when positions were lost, they forced the attackers to slow, regroup, and rethink. Inside Cherbourg, the final defenses tightened. German troops pulled back into stronger positions closer to the city. The fortress was shrinking but growing more dangerous. Each withdrawal was planned. Each retreat aimed to hold just long enough to complete destruction tasks. For American commanders, the pressure was relentless. Reports came in about damaged port facilities, about explosions heard inside the harbor, about German units still refusing to surrender. The fear was no longer whether Cherbourg would fall. The fear was whether it would be worth taking. As the city came into full view, the scale of the task became clear. This was not just a port. It was a defended system. Concrete bunkers guarded approaches. Hills overlooked key paths. The sea itself offered no easy solution. Naval guns waited offshore ready to assist. But even with support, the city would not fall quickly or cleanly. American soldiers felt the shift in the air. The fight ahead was different from what came before. This was no longer about moving forward. It was about breaking a final barrier. Morale mixed with exhaustion. Hope mixed with fear. German soldiers felt it too. They knew the end was near. Some tightened their grip on duty. Others quietly accepted their fate. Orders continued to arrive, but the reality around them spoke louder than any command. As fighting intensified around the city's edges, time became the enemy for everyone. Every hour lost meant more destruction inside the port. Every push forward risked lives. Every delay threatened the invasion itself. The battle had reached its most dangerous phase, where urgency and caution pulled in opposite directions. Cherbourg was no longer just a goal on a map. It was a test of strategy under pressure, a test of leadership under fear, a test of whether speed could outrun destruction. And as the sound of fighting closed in around the fortress, the battle stood on the edge of decisions that would shape everything that followed. As the fighting tightened around Cherbourg, the battle entered a phase where small choices began to matter more than large plans. This was the moment when a single order, given under stress, could change the outcome far beyond the next hill or street. For American commanders, the greatest question was simple but heavy. Should they push harder or slow down to protect their men? Intelligence reports suggested that German resistance was weakening. At the same time, signs of destruction inside the port were increasing. Explosions echoed from the harbor. Smoke rose from areas already under German control. Every sound felt like a warning that time was running out. Some American units were ordered to press forward without delay. The goal was clear. Keep the pressure constant. Do not give the defenders time to finish their work. Speed, even imperfect speed, was seen as the only chance to save something of the port. But speed brought risk. In several areas, units advanced faster than expected. Roads became clogged. Communication stretched thin. Some troops moved ahead without clear knowledge of what waited for them. When resistance suddenly appeared, confusion followed. Progress slowed again, costing the very time they were trying to save. On the German side, decisions carried a different weight. German commanders knew they could not hold forever. The question was how to use the final hours. Some chose to defend strongly at key points, forcing the Americans to stop and fight. Others focused fully on demolition, trusting that delaying actions elsewhere would buy enough time. This split in priorities created moments of weakness and moments of fierce resistance. In some areas, American forces advanced faster than expected, surprising defenders who were already preparing to withdraw. In others, German units held stubbornly, refusing to move even when their position no longer made strategic sense. One critical decision came from the German command regarding the harbor itself. Orders were given to complete demolition even as American forces closed in. Ships were sunk deliberately in narrow channels. Machinery was disabled beyond quick repair. Docks were damaged in ways that would take months to fix. These actions were not chaotic. They were calculated. German engineers knew exactly where to strike to cause the most delay. They did not need to destroy everything. They only needed to make the port unusable long enough to hurt the Allied advance. In this goal they were painfully effective. American commanders received reports of this destruction almost in real time. Each message increased the pressure. The temptation to rush grew stronger. But rushing into a fortified city could lead to disaster. The memory of earlier battles warned against reckless speed. At several points, American leaders chose caution over haste. They paused to regroup. They brought in support. They adjusted plans. These decisions saved lives, but they also gave the Germans more time to finish their work. This was the cruel balance of the battle. Every careful move protected soldiers but harmed the mission. Every aggressive push risked lives, but offered a chance to save the port. There was no choice without consequence. For soldiers on the ground, these turning points were felt as sudden changes in rhythm. Long hours of waiting followed by urgent movement. Orders that shifted quickly. Moments where it felt like everything depended on the next push forward. German soldiers felt the pressure too. As demolition progressed, some began to question the value of holding positions that would soon be abandoned. Morale became uneven. Some fought harder, driven by duty. Others saw the end approaching and focused only on survival. Civilians trapped in the city sensed the shift. Explosions inside the harbor grew louder. Fighting moved closer to their streets. The sense of waiting for an unknown outcome became almost unbearable. Eventually, the final decisions were made. German commanders recognized that holding the city any longer risked complete encirclement. The fortress could delay no more. Surrender became inevitable. But surrender came only after the last critical tasks were completed. When the German commander finally agreed to give up Cherbourg, the battle on land ended. But the true result of those final decisions was already visible. The port lay broken. The prize had been damaged beyond immediate use. Those last hours defined the battle more than weeks of planning. They showed how war often turns not on grand strategy, but on moments of choice made under extreme pressure. They revealed how success and failure can exist at the same time. And they set the stage for the hardest truth of Cherbourg. The fighting was over. But the cost of the decisions made there was only beginning to be felt. When the fighting slowed and the noise began to fade, the true weight of the battle became clear. Not in numbers or reports, but in the faces of the people who had lived through it. This was the human cost of Cherbourg. Quiet, heavy, and lasting. American soldiers moved through streets that felt drained of life. Buildings stood damaged and empty. The smell of smoke lingered in the air. Men who had pushed themselves for days now felt the sudden drop of tension. Some sat on curbs in silence. Others leaned against walls, too tired to speak. Victory did not bring celebration. It brought exhaustion. Fear had shaped every step they took. Fear of hidden defenses. Fear of making the wrong turn. Fear of being too late. Even after the fighting ended, that fear did not vanish at once. It stayed in the body. In tight shoulders. In slow movements. In eyes that kept scanning even when there was nothing left to fight. For many, the hardest part was realizing what the battle had demanded from them. They had been asked to move fast and fight carefully at the same time. To risk their lives for a goal that now stood broken in front of them. Some wondered quietly if it could have gone differently. Others pushed those thoughts away, focusing only on the fact that they were still alive. German soldiers faced a different kind of weight. Many emerged from bunkers and positions knowing their mission had succeeded, but their cause had failed. They had delayed the enemy. They had destroyed the port. But they had lost the city. For some, this felt like hollow duty. For others, it was simply the end of something they had never believed could last. Surrender was not relief for everyone. It brought uncertainty. Fear of what came next. Fear of judgment. Fear of the unknown future. These men had followed orders under pressure from above and danger from all sides. Now they stood with empty hands, their role in the war suddenly over. Civilians carried perhaps the heaviest burden. Families came out of shelters to find their city changed. Streets they knew were damaged. The port that once gave them work and purpose now lay silent and ruined. They had lived through weeks of fear without choosing sides. Their reward was survival, but survival came with loss. Children looked at soldiers with mixed feelings. Hope and caution. Adults searched for familiar faces. Some found them. Some did not. The end of fighting did not mean the end of suffering. It meant the beginning of rebuilding lives under new uncertainty. Inside the port, the damage told its own story. Broken machines stood like frozen witnesses. Sunken ships blocked channels. Engineers walked slowly, assessing what could be saved. Their faces showed the strain of knowing how much work lay ahead. For Allied planners, the human cost extended beyond the battlefield. The delay caused by Cherbourg's destruction meant longer supply lines. More pressure on drivers, engineers, and support troops. Longer hours. Less rest. The strain spread quietly through the army, affecting men who had never fired a shot near the port. The battle had asked for sacrifice not only in fighting but in endurance. Cherbourg revealed something difficult to accept. Even a successful operation could leave people feeling drained rather than proud. The human cost was not always dramatic. It was often silent. It showed in tired hands, in slow steps, in the weight people carried inside after the danger passed. As the city settled into uneasy calm, everyone involved felt the same truth in different ways. The battle was over. But its effects were far from finished. The question that followed the silence was simple but uncomfortable. Had this been a victory, a defeat, or something in between? The answer depended on where one stood and what one expected from the battle. On paper, the Allies had won. Cherbourg was in American hands. The German fortress had fallen. The defenders had surrendered. The road north through the Cotentin Peninsula was secure. From a military view, this was success. The enemy had been pushed back. Control of the city had changed. But war is not decided by paper alone. The true goal of Cherbourg was never the city itself. It was the port. And the port lay broken. American commanders walked through the harbor with mixed emotions. Relief that the fighting had ended. Frustration at what they saw. The docks were damaged. The cranes were useless. The channels were blocked. The port that was meant to solve their greatest problem now created a new one. This was a victory that arrived too late to be clean. For the Germans, defeat came wrapped in grim satisfaction. They had lost the city, but they had fulfilled their main order. The port would not help the enemy quickly. The delay they created would echo far beyond Cherbourg. In their view, the fortress had done its job. Yet this was not a triumph. Germany had given up ground it could never recover. Each delay only postponed the inevitable. The war would continue moving west, with or without Cherbourg. The defenders had sacrificed the future for time, and time was running out for them as well. For soldiers on both sides, the result felt unclear. American troops had fought hard for something that could not immediately help them. German soldiers had followed orders that ended in surrender. Neither side felt a clean sense of purpose at the end. Only the weight of what had been done. The battle did not end with cheers or parades. It ended with work. Allied engineers moved in almost immediately. They did not rest. They studied the damage. They measured depths. They planned repairs. Every hour mattered. The invasion could not wait for perfect conditions. Cherbourg had to be brought back to life as quickly as possible. This work was slow and frustrating. Sunken ships had to be cleared. Debris had to be removed piece by piece. Machinery needed repair or replacement. The sea itself had to be tamed again. Nature and destruction worked together to resist every effort. While this happened, the Allied advance continued. Supplies were stretched thin. Long truck routes carried the burden meant for the port. Drivers worked day and night. Roads wore down. Men grew more tired. Cherbourg's absence was felt far from its shores. Still, the invasion did not stop. That may be Cherbourg's greatest lesson. The port did not break the Allies, but it forced them to adapt. New supply methods were used. Temporary solutions became permanent longer than planned.